I can turn anything into R&B. And I'll show you how to do it. So it was my boy's birthday the other day and it got me thinking, could I take the happy birthday song and turn it into a fire R&B sample? You may be thinking, why would anyone want to do that? Let me rewind the clock a little bit. When kids are learning the alphabet, numbers, any simple things like that, what is one of the best ways for them to learn? Through nursery rhymes and songs. What are nursery rhymes and songs? Simple melodies. I remember Nile Rodgers, who wrote a lot of incredible soul music in the 1970s and 80s. He said, if the melodies are simple, the harmony underneath can be as complicated as you want it to be. Jazz chords, R&B chords, we can put them in as long as they enhance the melody that is on top. If you concentrate on melodies, they can elevate your chords and your harmonies of just your boring standard blam, 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 block chords. So I want you to start thinking melodically.
Melodies come straight from God. There's really no technique for melodies, really. You can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, you can't see it. You just feel it. It hangs in the air. It owns it. It dominates every time period, you know.
Yeah, because melodies, lyrics go hand in hand to make hit records.
We have a simple melody, a happy birthday melody, and we are going to put chords underneath it that make it sound like it's R&B. So what does that mean? It means we have to use chords that are familiar with R&B. We have to use sounds that are familiar in R&B. We need to use a bounce that is familiar in R&B. And then we can apply those different techniques and we can make any melody R&B. We can take any nursery rhyme, any song, anything we want and make it R&B once we know the building blocks of, you guessed it, R&B. We're going to start slowly, and as this sample or track or whatever you want to call it develops, got increasingly more complicated with my R&B isms. I'm going to show you how you can do exactly the same. Now, if you don't get this first time, rewatch the video or DM me on Instagram. I can talk you through certain parts of it. I've put everything on one piano sound here, chords and melody. Find it easier to talk as F major being our root, but you could also see this as a D minor progression, but let's just keep it F major for simplicity. Just at the start, melody is single notes, chords, harmony are multiple notes playing at the same time. I started this off by playing one chord for every 2 bars, and I did that to establish our R&B bass because it's always good not to overload the listener with a million things when the music starts to play. So I had these 2 introduction notes here, these 2 notes that land on C, and we are in the key of F major. The first chord that drops is some kind of B flat major chord. Why, you may ask? This is the 4 chord in F major and it contains our melody note. Our melody note being D is the major third of this B flat major chord. So you've got B flat or A sharp, you've got D, you've got F, and then, what's this grayed out? Well, a major chord is cool, but it's not very R&B, so let's make it a major 7th. Let's add in this note. We didn't harmonize this note. It would have been too much too early. We didn't harmonize this note. What comes after that is a E note. You can see this second chord and the E is contained within this chord. What am I doing here? I'm going from the 4 chord to the 3 chord, which is a move you've heard in many, many R&B songs. So the 3 chord is some kind of A minor chord. We have a, C, E. Boring again. We add a G note. Makes it an A minor 7th chord. Now what happens? Sounds good on a piano, but when we put it on a synth, it's going to sound a million times better. I'm just using this piano to illustrate to you what we're doing here. You can use any chord that you think sounds good that contains this E note. It doesn't actually have to fall within the scale of F major, but that is for a little bit more advanced. For now, any chord that you think sounds good that has that note in it and is in diatonic key of F major will work as a harmonization tool for that specific note, which is an E.
So guys, if you're getting something out of this, go follow me on Instagram, handles here, and cop some of my free mini kits. Link is in the description. I've got bass midis, I've got loads more stuff coming out.
Bar 9 to 11, what happens? So the first chord here at bar 9, I'm following the same pattern, and then I change the pattern here at bar 10. And this chord is just a G minor 7th. So like the A minor 7th, we just drop it down a whole tone, and that is the 2 chord in F major. And I'm using that for the la la for our D note, which is the 5th of G. You can see I'm not harmonizing every note yet. That would be too much in my opinion. Now my favorite part of this part of the song is this. I'm doing a 5-1, so I'm playing some kind of altered A dominant chord, using that as a 5 chord because I'm temporarily making this D minor 9 chord our 1 or our home bass. The notes here for you are just the A at the root, G, A, C sharp, F. At bar 10, this altered chord, there's no note that goes with this. The next note is this G note, to you. So we go from this to you with this G and then the F. By adding this chord in here at bar 10, I'm preempting this G note in an interesting way. By playing that 5 chord, I'm adding tension. We hear that note, to you, then we go down to that F, which is the minor 3rd in this D minor chord. For this D minor 9, I'm just building it with a D minor triad, so the D, the F, the A, the C, and an E on top, and then that melody note, the F, is just sitting on the top. And this D minor 9 is a beautiful chord, and it changes your expectation because you might think that a major chord was coming there, but I've gone to a minor chord, which just gives us that real R&B source. And there's some dissonance here with this F and this E note rubbing together. Think about it. Happy birthday to you. Blah. You'd expect something happy, but I changed the expectation and played a big D minor 9 chord. And you're getting that kind of solemn sadness coming through there. And then we're into the next half of the sample. Ba, ba. Left those 2 notes just on their own. And I knew that I was going to make this second half of the harmonization a bit more complicated. So at bar 13, I start doing a different kind of rhythm on my chords. As this harmonization is developing, I'm accenting every bam bam da da bam bam da da bam bam. Whereas before I was playing every 2 bars, and then I've got a little bit of variation towards like bar 9 and 10. Now I'm intensifying the energy here by playing more chords more frequently, but nothing too complicated to accentuate. At bar 13, you can see this melody note's on top now. And we're going from this C to this A, and the C is actually nestled nicely within this diminished chord, and this diminished chord gives us some really good tension. A is my bass note for both of these chords, which again rooted us down and meant we could move the chord shape around but still have that same bass note in there. So diminished chord, I just spread out the notes, but essentially a diminished chord can be made by playing a note, skipping 2 notes, playing a note, skipping 2 notes, and again I just played this out on the keyboard and found a voicing that I thought worked really nicely. I looked at the chords that came before it and tried to play notes in a similar range on the keyboard to make it sound natural. Then the next chord I went to was again a variation of that A altered chord, so this A note here, which is our root note, but after the diminished, this worked really nicely. You can see there's still tension in there that wants to be resolved. After those 2 tension chords, I used a very simple A minor 7th chord at bar 15. I repeated the same rhythm again. And the melody note here that we were harmonizing was an E note, and that sits nicely in the A minor 7th chord as the 5th of the chord. And there's your minor 7. My next chord is one of my favorite chords that's used all the time in 70s soul music and R&B. It is a 5 chord, but how I'm making it is I'm playing a 4 chord, which is the B flat major, and then I'm just putting the 5, which is the C note, in the bass. And you can do this in any scale. So if, for example, you're in C, you could take the 4 chord, which would be an F major chord, and you could put a G in the bass, and you would get this kind of similar sound, which sounds quite open and suspended. The interesting thing here is my bass notes are moving upwards from an A to a C, and then at bar 17 I'm going from an F sharp to a G, so there's similar movement here. However, the melody notes are going from an E down to a D, so birthday, happy birthday, again, down again, from an A to an F. I've got a similar kind of harmonic movement going on. It's not too strange for the ear to pick up. The chord that I've done here is actually a D major first inversion with the F sharp in the bass. And I'm using it really as a tension chord. And although it's not really in the key of F major, because the melody note and the pull of it is so strong, we can use this chord as a passing chord to get to our G minor 7th, our 2 chord in F major, with the melody note being F, and it works really, really nicely. A, F, there's our melody on the top there. And then we're through to the 2, and the last chord I dropped, U. The F again, and I use that D minor 9 again with the D, F, A, C, and E. The E being the 9, and then I just doubled up with that F on top. And we've had that before, so there is familiarity there. I want to talk about the sounds that I used for this, very R&B-esque. I'm going to mute the Happy Birthday melody and just show you the sample now formed without that melody. And the funny thing is, you're going to pick up that melody with just the chords that are playing now. However, it could still be a really, really fire R&B sample with chords that you wouldn't necessarily go to. This exercise can really help break you out of that monotonous of like, oh, I'm always playing the same chords, or I'm not sure where to go. So maybe take a simple melody. It doesn't have to be a nursery rhyme, but some kind of melody, or sing one yourself, and then try to harmonize that with chords. You'll be surprised at what you actually come out with. My main synth layer, I use the Sky Keys, and I was on the Thud Pluck preset. To achieve that lo-fi texture, I added Lossy, an EQ where I just filtered a lot out of the sound, a phaser with quite a heavy setting, Tremolator, one of my favorite Soundtoys plugins, and then the S1 Imager just to spread the sound a little bit across the sonic field. My only other melodic sound here, I did try some multi-keys, but it wasn't quite working on this sample. It doesn't always work. If you want to know more about multi-keys, check out some of my other videos on it. I used Logic's stock Mellotron plugin on this setting, and the processing was pretty much the same as I had on the Sky Keys, but all I did was add a bit of sidechaining with the Shaperbot. My bass, I went for my trusted Growler Moog bass in Omnisphere, and you can see that already getting that R&B sound. Added some percussion here, and I programmed in a nice simple hi-hat pattern. On this wood tap, I used my favorite Arturia Rev Spring. This was my pattern. This little syncopated part here is very Sonder, very Brent Faiyaz, very deep hat, and all I've done here is just programmed and dropped in the audio where we're doing a little skip there, and the hi-hats are just playing even notes there with a little bit of velocity variation. Added a vocal from Monty Booker, just adds a bit more bounce to the sample, and I just repeated that every couple of bars. Pulled in a vocal loop from Splice, but then I processed it, put it in key. That was all I did there. A little bit of EQing, some reverb, and then on the second half, different vocal, where I added some vocal bender to change the formant, added some ambience and a couple of textures from Louis' kit, and that made the sample. And the cool thing is sometimes you can take these chords out and what you're left with just sounds fire on its own. It's a good experiment, it's a good exercise for you to do, and I hope you try it and let me know in the comments if you do. And if you got something out of this video, check the video in the top corner out for some more source and hit me up on my socials.